delicious. Vlad surrendered himself to it, felt it coursing through his veins. Then he focused on Henry and pushed. Henry smiled. It wasn't every day he got to spend a day hanging out on the slopes with his cousin and a gaggle of pretty girls, not to mention a set of flirtatious, doe-eyed twins. Henry kept his cool and threw Giles a glance, raising his voice so the twins would hear. Let's hit that black diamond. As expected, Giles's jaw dropped. He had no idea how important it was to impress girls with your skills, even if you had only ever been on a black diamond trail twice in your life. The twins grinned at Henry, and he turned with a casual step toward the slope, flashing his best smile briefly over his shoulder. If he played his cards right, there would be a fireplace and a set of matching snow bunnies in his near future. Smooth, Henry. Keep it smooth. Vlad studied his thoughts, smirked, and gently nudged. Henry lost his footing and did a faceplant in the snow. Vlad would have remained in his mind to enjoy the laughter of Joss and the girls, but it was too hard to focus when he was laughing so hard himself. He pulled quickly out of Henry's mind, and Vicus's laughter joined his. As I said, Vladimir, it is both productive and entertaining to read and control minds. Are you enjoying yourself? Vlad beamed into the darkness. Absolutely. What's next? Vicus was quiet for a moment, and when he spoke, it was with hesitation. Perhaps we could move on to something a bit more productive. Say, vengeance. Vlad swallowed, dropping his voice to nearly a whisper. What do you mean exactly? What do you mean exactly? Only that I am sure there are certain wrongdoers in your life that have been long awaiting some payback for their actions against you. Am I wrong? Vlad didn't have to think hard. No. But what do you mean by revenge? Vicus's tone softened, but that didn't hide his eagerness. Nothing more than a harmless prank. Of course, if you'd rather not pay them back for all that they've done to you. Vlad thought about Bill and Tom and every locker he had ever been slammed into. He licked his lips slowly and said, What do you have in mind? A knock at the door barely echoed into the room. Vlad relaxed his shoulders in disappointment. Their session was over, and before he could give Bill and Tom a taste of their own medicine, Otis opened the door wide, spilling light into the room. If I might steal my nephew away for a moment, Vicus nodded. Certainly. After a nod to Vicus, Vlad followed Otis out into the chilly air. The snow was blinding. He squinted and looked over at his uncle as they trekked up a nearby hill. Is something wrong? Is something wrong? Otis gave him a sideways glance. He pushed forward until they'd crested the hill. In front of them was a small clearing, untouched by footprints. Otis sighed. What would make you think something was wrong? Vlad cleared his throat. He had the sneaking suspicion he was in trouble, but he wasn't sure why. Well, you've never interrupted my training room sessions before. Otis turned to face him, his lips pursed tightly. It's just that I don't approve of today's lessons, or rather, where today's lessons were turning to. Concepts like vengeance and humans used for amusement may suit some vampires, Vlad, but they hardly suit you. Vlad paused, then lowered his voice suspiciously. Those walls are thick enough to block out all sound, Otis. How did you know what we were talking about? Otis's steps slowed as they entered the clearing on the tree-topped hill. He dropped his gaze to the virgin snow on the ground. Vlad swore he could detect a hint of shame in his uncle's posture. "You read my mind. I thought we had a deal." Vlad's chest rose and fell as both his breathing and his heart rate picked up in irritation. "You stay out of my head, I stay out of yours, remember?" Otis's eyes snapped back to Vlad's. His jaw tightened, as did his tone. "I remember all too well. Perhaps you'll do well to recall how unsettling it is to have someone wandering around in your head the next time you make it. Henry fall. Or worse, what were your plans for Bill and Tom exactly?" Vlad dropped his eyes, but only for a second. "I wasn't going to hurt them or anything. If you give in to this urge, this yearning for vengeance, you'll find it only too easy to move from harmless prank to—" Otis broke off then. His eyes wore the look of someone who has said too much. Vlad tensed. With his dark eyebrow raised, he put a chill in his tone. "To enslaving the human race." Otis's eyes widened briefly with surprise, then darkened in defeat. His voice had dropped to a near whisper. "There are many steps between, but they are linked, Vlad, and closer than you realize, I assure you." Vlad stood quiet for some time. His uncle had all but said he believed Vlad to be the Provost. How could he think that? How could he believe that his only nephew was a monster? Vlad's chest ached, but he managed to keep the hurt out of his tone. "Otis, you're blowing this way out of proportion. Besides, you can't just come into my thoughts and not allow me into yours, especially after agreement. I was trying to protect you. From what? I thought you trusted Vicus to teach me." "I do, it's just—" Otis shook his head, his anger visibly melting away. "Vicus is a traditional teacher. For the most part, his curriculum is brilliant, but some of his ideals are not necessarily the ideals that I wish to instill in you." Vlad chewed his bottom lip thoughtfully before speaking. "Shouldn't that be up to me?" Otis met Vlad's eyes, wide and full of awe. Such wisdom from someone so young. He shook his head and released a sigh, warming the chilled air between them. "I will interfere no more." Vlad drew his collar up so that it touched his cheeks and shivered, shuffling his feet in the crisp white powder. One thing was for sure. Otis could have picked a warmer place to lecture him. "Is that why you brought me out here?" "Partially. I also wanted to give you a gift." Otis's eyes were careful. "Would you like to see your father again?" Suddenly, Vlad wasn't cold anymore. He looked at Otis, who merely nodded, as if to say that yes, it was possible. But it wasn't, unless vampires could also travel through time, and if that were the case, Vlad was going to go back to the day he lost his parents and get them out of the house before the fire, save them, so that they would never have to be apart again. But it wasn't possible. It couldn't be, or Otis would have told him already. "What are you?" "It's simple. Thomas and I used to do this whenever we were apart, to catch one another up on moments we deemed important or memorable. It requires that you open your mind to me." A flash of guilt crossed Otis's eyes. "But trust that I will go no further than to share my memories with you. Your thoughts are safe. I swear that I will not read, not tread there unwanted again." "You mean I can see your memories of my dad?" At Otis's nod, Vlad's bottom lip trembled, but he bit it back into submission. "I would like that very much." "Breathe deep and open your mind." Otis locked eyes with him, his gaze fevered and intense. Vlad drew a long, slow, deep breath and tried not to think about anything in particular, just as Vicus had taught him. At first there was nothing, just the uncluttered quiet of his mind. And then, a flash, a face, familiar Otis then, and Vlad saw his twinkling eyes, the familiar way the corner of his mouth rose in a smirk. Familiar, because Vlad's did that too. Vlad tried to speak but couldn't. It was just a memory, just a fixed picture inside Otis's head. He kept his mind open and watched the film jump through blurry images until it settled on another memory. Thomas was at a library. A wall of books surrounded him as he pored through every image. Vlad watched him, the way he seemed unaware of anything but the words on the page, so like Vlad whenever he immersed himself in a really good book. It was startling how similar his dad's alike. His dad's mannerisms were to his. Vlad knew he and his dad were alike, but he'd forgotten just how much. Otis's voice broke in. Reading again. What this time? What this time? Thomas looked up, his intense focus broken by his surprised smile. Just some old stories, to pass the time, you know. What about you? I thought you were on a plane to Siberia. Otis's words were cut off by the film as it flipped, once again, through time. Rain was pouring down in sheets, painting Thomas's hair to his skin. He looked over his shoulder at Otis, his eyes sincere. We're brothers, Otis. We'll always be brothers. The film reel slowed, and Vlad could feel Otis pulling out of his mind. But he wasn't ready yet. Not to let go of the few precious moments he witnessed. He needed more. Just a few more. The film reel jumped in reverse. Once again, Thomas was standing in the rain. This time, his forehead was creased in anger. I'm not asking you to lie, nor to put aside your prejudices. Otis, I really wanted to say goodbye before I left. A human, Thomas. I understand the need to be loved, but to abandon all of Elysia for a human, that's madness. Otis shook his head. Where will you go? I dare not say. You don't trust me? Thomas paused and held Otis's gaze before turning away. I dare not say. Fine, go if you must, but don't ask me for help when this all comes crashing down around you. Otis's voice shook. I feel like I don't even know you anymore. Thomas looked over his shoulder at Otis, his eyes sincere. We're brothers, Otis. We'll always be brothers. Vlad furrowed his brow. The movie in his mind came to an end, and when he opened his eyes, Otis's forehead matched his. Otis, It's okay. You didn't know any better, and I didn't think you'd be able to pull the memory from me. It was the last day I saw your father. We fought. I was less than supportive of his romance with your mother, and I'm ashamed to admit I was even less supportive when it came to Melina's pregnancy. Shame washed over Otis's features, and when he met Vlad's eyes, Vlad had to bite his tongue to keep the tears at bay. Forgive an old fool, Vlad. I had no idea at the time how much I would regret that my last moment with Thomas was an argument. Nor did I have my clue. Nor did I have any clue that I would come to care so deeply for his son. Vlad dropped his gaze to the snow between his feet. In the past year, Otis had been something to him that only Thomas had been before. A father figure. A round ear betrayed him and rolled down his cheek, dripping from his chin to the snow below. Thank you, Otis, for everything. Otis seemed to swallow his own tears and look down the hill at the small village. You should get back to your lessons. Vlad cleared his throat against his fist. If you don't mind, I'd rather you showed me what ideals you want me to have. Otis glanced back at him, his eyebrows raised. You mean teach you? Vlad, I'm not sure I'd be much of a teacher. Vlad smirked, recalling the costumes and assignments of his 8th grade year. You didn't do so bad last year. What do you want to learn? Vlad shrugged. The truth was he wanted to learn anything. Otis was willing to teach him. More than that, he wanted to draw out the small his own words. They sounded different. Not muddled, really, but low, as if confined in a small space. Otis' chuckle reverberated through Vlad's skull, a pleasant buzzing in his brain. Absolutely. It comes in handy when humans are around and we want to discuss things of vampiric nature. Pretty neat, eh? Vlad's lip broke into a grin. This is way cooler than hovering. I can't wait to show Henry. Ought to make algebra class more interesting. Otis shook his head and spoke aloud. Henry is human. He doesn't have the brain power to receive such clear communication. You can read his thoughts easily and even plant thoughts in his mind that lead him to wonder about certain things, driving his curiosity to the brink, where he is driven to follow where your planted thoughts lead, but you can never clearly communicate by thought with a human, even a drudge like Henry. Vlad's shoulders sank some. That sucks. You're so like Thomas, impatient with what skills you've been given and constantly longing for more. Otis chuckled, then patted Vlad on the back before turning and making his way down the hill. Not necessarily a bad way to be. Vlad hurried to keep up. Is there anything else I'm missing out on? I mean, besides learning about telepathy and memory sharing. Otis was quiet for several steps before sighing and shoving his hands into his coat pockets. The truth is that I don't know what lies ahead for you, Vlad. As I told you before, you're one of a kind. No one but you has ever been born a vampire. We were all made, bitten by our creators, and given the essence of Elysia. The future for each of us is fairly certain. The future for you is not yet written. I could give you a list of skills that you may develop, but it would be senseless to speculate. Vlad wanted to say that it wasn't senseless, that he had no idea what was coming for him, and he was pretty sure that a vampire going through puberty was a lot scarier than a human going through it. But Otis was already many steps in front of him, and he had the feeling his reasons would come out sounding like a whine, and that wasn't at all how he wanted to portray himself. When he got up to Otis outside the training room, he shoved his hands in his pockets, mimicking his uncle. When we go back to Bathory, will you stay with me and Nellie? Otis sighed, and Vlad had his answer. His heart sank into his stomach and curled into a shriveled little ball. I can't. Not yet. First, I must convince Elysia that I am not a criminal and that my actions were necessary, and that will take time. If I could get 3 of the councils on my side, I might be able to make my case. But until I convince them of my good intentions, I'm afraid moving to Bathory is out of the question. I cannot risk your and Nellie's lives. But I have the Lucius. I can protect you. Vlad reached into his jeans pocket to withdraw the weapon, but Otis grabbed him by the wrist and shook his head carefully. Not here, Vlad. Keep it hidden. Vlad nodded slowly, and Otis relaxed his grip. The Lucius may be what protects you from the so-called justice of Elysia, Vlad, but I am well known, as are the details of my supposed crimes. It would not be enough to keep them from tearing that town apart to find me. Bathory is just too close to Stokerton to risk moving to, even with the aid of a Dago charm. I'm not nearly as brave as your father was to try hiding there. Vlad shoved the Lucius deeper into his pocket. Dago charm. A charm used to block telepathy. You'll learn more about this later on, as well as how to utilize your mark. Otis's serious pursed lips relaxed into a smile then. The most wonderful things await you. A lifetime of learning, experiences unlike any other, and worlds that you have not yet dared to dream. Just wait until you feed from the source. I'll never do that. Vlad met Otis's eyes. I won't. Otis shrugged as if to say, maybe you will, maybe you won't, and opened the door to the training room. His uncle's passivity irritated Vlad, though he wasn't sure why exactly. He stepped inside and had time enough to notice Vicus before the door closed behind him, sealing them in the darkness once again. does that say?